and there's small conflicts between what I saw and what they saw, but you can expect that. But they all reported, and we wrote reporting forms up for the study group, and each had pretty much the same description. So, but I've never seen any aircraft act like that. It's almost like it could read our minds. I knew when the guy ran out of motion picture film or film, and so they know the exact time. It's like you're right. It's almost they have a mind reading capacity, and they kind of synchronize their events around what you're thinking or what's happening, and it's just a very spooky phenomena.
Yeah, and it'd be scary too. And I brought this up on my show. Back in the 80s, I had a friend that in the business I had, because I've been in and out of broadcast, since 76. I haven't gone and done broadcasting all, without taking breaks in between because you get burned out. But I became a friend with a guy. You remember Republic Airlines back in the 80s before they went bankrupt?
Vaguely.
Yeah, they were a big airline. And my friend at the time, he was a colonel in the Air Force during Vietnam, and he was telling me, that they would come from Japan or wherever it is, Guam or whatever it is, and drop their bombs, in North Vietnam and then return. He said one day he was just looking out his cockpit window, and off to his wing there was a UFO. Now, he said the worst, dumbest thing you can do to end your military career, or I'll even tell more here in a second, is report it. The first thing he did is he thought he was doing the right thing. He got on the radio and he reported that there was a UFO, off his wing and it's pacing him. And when he went to land, he was escorted off the plane. All the crew members were separated, taken into a building in different rooms, and they were interrogated. And, he said he had to sign a statement that he never saw a UFO.
Yeah, it's called the Silence Group. I don't know if it's the CIA or they even believe there's a separate group altogether, even from the CIA, that's really taking these things seriously, And I don't know. They say pretty much the MJ-12 thing was a hoax, or at least it was something that can't be totally accurate. But we know was a group, a high level group of people involved. I think Irina Scott wrote in her recent book she has out called Sacred Corridors. Even she acknowledges that there's a high-level group that's taking these things very serious, and that more or less the Air Force and other things are just more or less public relation disinformation. They take the reports and they tell you that there's no such thing going on, but there's a high-level group. What do you think about MJ-12? You think there's any accuracy there? It seems to be something they latched onto.
I think, yes. I think you hit it on the nail. I do think there's merit behind it, and it existed, and I still think in a form of it still exists today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's Irina Scott feels the same way. A lot, of course, Friedman, the physicist, he feels that it was a real group. There may have been something very similar to it. The trouble is they feel that some of the documents were faked. What do you think about that?
That's possible because, I think there's disinformation going along with, accurate information. It seems like, for everything it comes out and has come out, it doesn't take long before there's disinformation to confuse you. Mm-hmm. And that's been going on since, as far as I remember, back in 1976, and it hasn't stopped. So every little bit of information that does leak out, all of a sudden there's now something to, wreck the credibility. People are really obsessed with this TV show, Project Blue Book. But
yeah, I don't know what to make out of that.
to me, it's just a TV show. It has some truth to it, but then I think it's hyped up naturally because they got to sell, airtime and make money off of it. They won't do it. They wouldn't do it for, if it wasn't profitable. But the thing is, even Project Blue Book was not really set up to gather information. For all the information they gathered, they made sure that disinformation was going out.
Well, what do you think about Ruppelt? Remember Ruppelt? He came out with his book, and his book really kind of played up the fact that the UFOs apparently were real, because, obviously they were. But he treated them pretty above board and serious. And then a few years later, right before he died, he came out with added on debunking chapters onto the book that pretty well poo-pooed the whole topic and made fun of it.
Well, again, I don't know, because I don't know if he was in contact with different agencies, surviving members of the family. It's funny because, you know what, if you go on and seriously make waves about UFOs, even today, you'll get debunked. You will. I had a guest on my show 2 months ago, and after he was on my show, he was on Coast to Coast, and then he was on Midnight on the desert, in the desert. Now, when he was on my show, we had our break, which we're going to have to take in about 10 minutes. He went outside to smoke. He noticed this black helicopter, and he took pictures of it on his cell phone and sent it over to me, hovering over his house. Because he was on my show for 2 hours, so we were into it about an hour. And I kind of blew it off. But, he was talking about a secret a base somewhere in Texas, and he probably said a little bit too much. Then, when he was on Coast to Coast, when they went for break, he went out to smoke. He started sending me pictures again of another helicopter, a black one, hanging over his house. This, kind of this staying there for like 10 minutes and then taking off. That's the type of intimidation I think it still goes on.
Would you think a silence group or a government group would give that much expense to the equipment to be used in that fashion? Or do you think that just might be a UFO phenomena?
I don't know. I think it's probably to cause disinformation. Now, this guy did probably say too much, because he found a farm in Texas somewhere that he thought was strange, so he started watching it. And he noticed there were some, transmission towers that said, property of the U.S. government. Now, here's the old abandoned farm. And then he claimed that he saw, some military guys come out of a silo. And, they chased him off. So I think he stumbled on something he shouldn't have stumbled on.
Yeah, there's been other, this is a part of what they call the silence group. And, of course, remember Albert K. Bender, and then later on he said they were space beings, but I feel it might have been, the Robertson panel was a CIA-directed panel that came out and pretty much set the groundwork for poo-pooing the UFO phenomena, and I think that was in '53 or something. And they pretty much dictated how the government's UFO policy was to be after that time, and then things like the Condon Committee came up, but it seemed like it didn't make any difference how phenomena the UFO report was. They just had no interest in it, and they wanted nobody else to be interested in it. And that may be a part of that disinformation program that you're talking about. Somebody's taking these things very seriously behind the scenes. And on the news just today, they had something about the government, the Navy, and the government want to educate the public more on UFOs because they've been getting a number of UFO cases that are alerting them to the seriousness of the problem. Now, you were talking about, what do you call it, earlier we were calling it the the opening up of UFO news, disclosure.
Right.
Now that seems a little bit incongruous with not wanting disclosure. If the Navy and different branches of government are asking people to take these things more serious because of what some of their pilots are encountering.
Well, I will say this, like you mentioned the pilot that saw a UFO, he got grounded for a long period of time. He had to get an attorney. The attorney had to fight for him to keep his license because he was going to lose his license. He was going to lose his job because you know what? If you're a pilot and you fly commercial, if you say use and report a UFO, your career is gone. It's history.
What could be the reason? What do you think's going on?
I still think that they're trying to cover up stuff. But the here's the thing I think about. Going back about 2.5 years ago, the incident with the Nimitz off of California, where the two fighter pilots, out on training, encounter a UFO. They take video of the UFO. They go after the UFO. They kick their afterburners on. They can't catch the UFO. The UFO was like gone. It was history. Now, that didn't hit nothing in the news. It took over 2 years before all of a sudden all the networks had a little bit of video of this, chase after a UFO. I find that kind of strange. That information all of a sudden leaked out. How could that leak out 2 years later?
Yeah.
But then I find it really strange. 2 months later, our Secretary of the Air Force is talking to graduating cadets and telling the graduating cadets, the next war, guys, is not going to be a ground war. It's going to be out in space.
Yeah.
I kind of took that as a little bit kind of strange. Then 2 months later, our president says, hey, we need to create a space force. Now, I think at the start he was maybe joking or he was setting it up for whatever. But then all of a sudden, he goes at least the motions. Of course, Congress is not funding it. Now, I guess it's going to be part of the Air Force. But they're trying to slowly get information out. But I don't know. See, it's been so much since Roswell of disinformation that, let's face it, if you have a good job, a secure job, and you report you saw a UFO and you push it as far as you can push it, your career is pretty much gone.
Mm-hmm. It seems like they're using some kind of technique of slapping you in the face and then hugging you at the same time. And it may be a way of getting people into a state of schizophrenia or into a very like a PTSD state, because it's like, everything's great and then punch you in the stomach, Yeah. So I don't know. It could be some kind of psychological experiment going on. Just like on the news tonight, they were talking about the Navy wanting to, saying we need all the help we can get because of these pilot sightings. It's like, and then turn around the next time and then really harass and try to Shanghai different pilots like you were describing. It doesn't make sense. So it's almost like some kind of psychological experiments going on. Of course, it's not unusual for humans, especially people in power, to be acting very psychotic and aberrative. We can go outside the UFO field there, and I can give you some good examples.
Yeah.
But we know the government's into some kind of mind control, mental control. They got all kinds. They've had experiments over the years, MK Ultra and different. There was a Dr. G.H. Esterbrook that was involved in setting up Manchurian candidate experiments, and there's actually different case histories by a legal number, and to induce multiple personality disorder experiments and hypnotic experimentation and research was another one was named that, and then they have SI and H experimentations back from September 25, 1951. And over the years, they seem to get more they have to be more sophisticated at it. You know, it's the way knowledge